Hello, beautiful listeners. It's your host, Tembi. Welcome to Lifted, a podcast that pulls back the curtain on creativity, resilience, and the extraordinary moments when everything changes. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest, Cha McCoy. Cha is a force in the wine world. She's a sommelier, an entrepreneur, and a traveler whose journey has taken her from Harlem to vineyards around the globe and back. Her clients include the prestigious James Beard Foundation, and she's been featured on Netflix's High on the Hog Season 2. And what dazzles me most about Cha is her passion for creating connections through wine, through travel, and through the rich cultural history she brings to everything she does. In this conversation, I was struck by Cha's journey from exploration, starting with her roots in Harlem and expanding out across the world. She shared how early experiences of traveling through the boroughs of New York City sparked her love for discovering new cultures, and how her father instilled in her an openness to food, culture, and new experiences. I learned that Cha's path into the world of wine wasn't something she planned. It was born out of her passion for the Italian lifestyle she fell in love with while living in Rome, and a desire to bring that experience back to her community. And what's so inspiring is how Cha created her own opportunities when doors, they didn't open for her, hosting wine dinners in her home and launching her business from the ground up. If you're wondering how to turn your passion into something more, and if you've ever felt like you're charting a path no one's walked before, this episode is for you, because Cha's insights on building a career around what you love, even when the journey isn't straightforward, it will give you so much to think about. Grab your favorite drink, maybe even a glass of wine, and listen to this episode. Hello, Cha. Welcome to the Lifted podcast.
Hi, Tembi. Thanks for having me on. Or shall I say, ciao, sorella?
Ciao, sorella. We'll definitely get into that. We have an Italian connection, affinity, similarity that I think will be really, really fun to talk about today. And also, I like to begin these conversations by just, especially this season that we're talking about travel, where are you right now?
I'm in Harlem.
You're in Harlem,
Yes,
USA. I don't even call it Harlem, New York City. It's Harlem, USA.
that's right. Harlem World. I'm home.
Which is where you were born,
Yes.
and you have lived and traveled everywhere, but you keep coming back, and you have brought your life and your life's work back to where you began in Harlem. And so I want to I like to begin the conversations talking about kind of some early childhood stuff, and particularly any memory of your first trip. Do you ever, what was like your early, I don't know if it was on a plane or car or train, sitting in the back seat watching things go by, but what is an early childhood memory that you felt like, oh, I took that trip and it changed me?
You know what I like, and I'm sure we'll get to this in the season that I'm in right now, writing or handing in, hopefully, the final version of my manuscript. I like telling people that being a New Yorker, you feel like you traveled every time you go to a new borough, right? It's a new culture, a new sense of identity. You have to like understand or decode a new language sometimes too. So there's something about just being someone from New York City, proper, when you cross in boroughs, almost feels like you need a passport, depending on what neighborhood you in. So I will say that that made me feel like I was like, without knowing where continents were at a very young age, knowing that I was in New York and it's the country of, that probably felt the same sensation or same feeling is exactly what I got when I would cross into Queens or would be in Brooklyn or in Washington Heights with my dad. So I would say that probably was the seed of travel for me, by just understanding that New York City has so much cultures. And so you got to see the world through just New York. My mom was very serious about like, okay, we from Harlem, but you want to know other places. So wherever she had connections at, and that's a lot how I solo travel, is where we travel to. So her cousins down in Virginia, one of her youngest brothers, one of my uncles actually is from the Navy, worked for the Navy, and so ended up in California. So when I at a young age flying to California, and I would say even younger than even being on a plane, at one point they decided to do family trips where we went to all these places via Amtrak. So we went cross country to California via Amtrak. And I think that was very much a first way of how just being African American and traveling in America, how that resonated for us. So the train ended up being the new Greyhound, I guess, in that case, but with the same brown paper bag with the fried chicken. This is how we traveled on the Amtrak.
What I love in your share is you've expressed it without using the word, but it's a migration story of one that African Americans took from the South to the North, and the fact that that was a part of your mother and I'm assuming your grandmother's experience. And then what that movement, that
Mhm.
sense of seeking a new place and new opportunity and new experiences, they seeded that in you, and they were like, let's go here and there. And I love what you specifically shared about New York City, because I'm sure many listeners to this podcast, maybe they live in New York or have visited or are from there. But if you, by chance, you have never been to New York City, and if by chance you don't understand what it means to travel between boroughs and literally experience different countries, particularly, and I don't know if you grew up in the 90s, if you grew up in the,
80s,
my
90s. Mhm.
80s, 90s. So then New York was not even like it is now, where, maybe that's less the case today. But back then, oh, you heard different languages, you ate different foods, because the boroughs were places where immigrants had settled and formed their own cultures inside of New York City.
And even to that same extent, and I think that was unique for me, is because me being from Harlem, my parents being from Harlem, born in Harlem, you know, they were not like someone would have to say, let's go to Queens. Like that's not a thing you would do. So you would have to have a reason, whether it's relatives or something, or even if it's within the same borough, like going to Chinatown. We really grew up eating in restaurants. And I would say, like my father with the Zygot book when I was young, he was like locked in, like, we're going to try here. So me and my brother, a year apart, we're like his little explorers. So we actually traveled through food. That's how we understood the difference between us having sushi and tempura at like 8 years old. We're being black and from the hood. You're a little kid, you come to school. What you do this weekend? Oh, I had snails for dinner. They're like snails, people faces, So I think that allowed me to be more open to cultures at an early age, and also wanted to question my own culture too. Like, okay, like why am I different from them? Because we eat this way and other people don't.
I think I want to ask about, because you touched on the sort of diversity of, Harlem is this melting pot, again, for listeners who may not know, of both Southern American culture, Southern African American culture, Caribbean, West Indian Black culture. There's a Muslim influence. So you were all these people of a similar hue mixing together with all these different diverse food cultures who have all traveled, migrated to, Harlem, New York City, and they are living there. You are going to go on to be, and one of the things we're going to talk about is a specialist, an entrepreneur in the wine space. But I'm sure did anyone drink wine in your house growing up? Was that a part of, was there a wine culture in your home or no?
It wasn't so much a wine culture. The culture is Harlem, right? The Harlem is the culture overall, right? And I think that when someone understands or finally meets, someone from Harlem, I think the religion that you are, the race that you are, where I'm more bordering to like El Barrio. So if someone is Puerto Rican and is my neighbor, that's very common. Today, we have a very large Senegalese community. So all of these differences, Harlem is actually at the center. There was people that I grew up with that I didn't even know were Hispanic, like until I like met their grandparents and stuff like that, or from like you said, islands. One of my best friends, I didn't know her family was from St. Thomas because Harlem is actually what we are first. And I think that was something I also knew the difference between, like, if you went to Brooklyn, they're the island that they are from, et cetera, that kind of represents them more. So there is also this kind of cultural difference where the identity of Harlem ends up standing, again, another childhood friend was Panamanian. I didn't know spoke Spanish at all, but because we all identify as Harlemite first, and then everything else became like second. So I would say just kind of understanding that, like that took more presence, and then the connection to that was champagne. Like when you hear about Harlem Renaissance and you hear about how much champagne played a role. I started out in a wine shop in Harlem as well, and it used to be hard to get people to start drinking grower champagne because the way they feel about Moet. I feel like there is something about just Harlem and champagne that goes hand in hand. And that dates back to the Harlem Renaissance. Today I still have a hard time trying to get people to understand that champagne is sparkling wine, like it is wine. They think that champagne is like its own thing, and that is actually our giving last name is Champagne, spelled with a Y for my family. So again, we are from the streets. That is our street name. If you want to kind of make association to that, so we're all the Champagnes.
Are you telling me that your neighborhood family name was Champagne?
And it still is. So my father's Tony Champagne. And so this is, I guess it's just like if you had a rap name or something
Oh,
like that, right? You're
no,
not
no,
gonna,
I
oh,
understand
okay,
the
you
family
picking up what I'm
nickname.
putting
I
down.
love that it's Champagne. So again, to your origin story of the work you do in the world, it's already there. Your family is steeped in a wine nickname on the streets of
At this
Harlem
point, yeah.
at this
Yeah, at
point.
this
Okay.
point, it kind of just remain, it's luxury more than it is about wine.
So you go through school in Harlem, you go off to college,
Yeah.
you eventually go to Rome.
Yes.
You begin to fall in love with wine and as a consumer first.
Sure.
And then you come back to the States and you get a corporate job. You just get a straight up, I need a job.
An engineering job that that's what I studied in at university.
And so when you come back to the States and you're working your job, a lot of people who are listening to this podcast are at an inflection point in their lives,
Mm.
perhaps for many different reasons. But people are also thinking like, well, there's this thing that is of interest to me, this hobby, love, passion, creative pursuit that I love, but how does it fit in with like my life? That question, or which path do I follow? So as you're working, you're also using like every PTO day, every extra dime to travel and learn about wine. When
Yes.
did the moment happen for you when you realized I could get paid, or I can make a path or a life, a career for me, a vocation that includes the thing I love? When did that happen?
I think the when I was living in Italy, I actually realized just the lifestyle was way more attractive than kind of the life I was leading back home. So if I didn't stay, then it was kind of like, what was going to be the souvenir? Like, how can I take from this lesson, after 2 years living there, now returning, begrudgingly back to America. I didn't really want to come back, but I was trying to live somewhere else in Europe, but didn't want to stay in Italy either. So I was like, but I can still feel the connection. So I think that's something to say, even when people are traveling just for on a 1 week vacation, what can you learn about yourself, or how do you bring a little bit of that trip back home? And that was what wine was for me, where I was very connected to the idea of like, oh, like wine was part of let's go to the vineyards on a weekend, let's go to a wine festival. That was part of my lifestyle when I was living in Italy, not attempting to try to learn it for anything more than, I guess, a hobby and being more informed. And then returning and going, I want to connect back to that same feeling. I was actually finishing up, I did a capstone with actually Pfizer. So I was working, doing my thesis part of my MBA program. And I said, in the meantime, let me just do this, I guess, for fun. And I worked part time at at a wine shop in my neighborhood in Harlem. It's called a winery. And so that was my first wine job, but it still wasn't like I'm going to be in the wine industry. It was kind of like I can't completely let go of the feeling that I had. And I wanted to be surrounded talking Italian to people, which was, talking about being able to sell Italian wine, bringing, new distributors and winemakers would come and stop by the shop. So I would get excited to continue to practice the language with them. And so I had this connection, of course, and now I need to learn also like French and Spanish and all the other countries in that shop as well. But I think there was something where I held on, or I was being able to satisfy myself a little bit from that experience of living in Italy by being around people who get me. The manager, general manager of the store, Eric White, became my mentor. He was the one who started telling me, well, you've been doing this engineering thing, but you seem very excited about wine. Did you know? So he was one who exposed me to even the word sommelier, like what the world of wine can be professional.
So it sounds like you are sort of pursuing three things, kind of at once. Both the profession of engineering and a way of thinking that being an engineer, and by the way, I am not an engineer, but what I think of engineers, I think they know how to put things together and make things like
Right.
happen. That's what an engineer does, right? So there's that way of thinking. Then you're searching for what I call a recapturing of a previous experience, like pulling those Italian or European or travel experiences into your present life. And then you are day to day translating quite literally both your own lived experience, having traveled outside of Harlem and in Europe, but also translating wine and flavors and tastes and to people who are coming to visit. And I think that sort of incubator of all of those experiences, is that what led you to begin your first hosting wine dinners and pairings in your home in Harlem? What brought
Yes.
you to that moment that began your business?
Yeah.
So
That was definitely it. But I think it was more or less the restrictions at the store. There's a lot of, I don't want to say red tape, but again, I don't own the shop. I'm not a manager. I was excited to want to do something new. I guess the direct translation for the work that we do in retail shop, they call us cavist. That would be the French word for it. The French word for being a wine steward at a restaurant bar where you're serving wine, it would be sommelier. I think sommelier has become the much larger, broad title for anybody that works in wine. I felt like a sommelier because I was literally on what they called Little Senegal, right? 116th Street. And again, another very Muslim community. So a lot of the places the restaurants did not serve alcohol part of the restaurants. So I ended up being a like de facto sommelier to tourists or people who were visiting to eat at the different restaurants on the street because they end up becoming like BYOB restaurants. And we were the wine shop on a BYOB like street, where a lot of restaurants was this.
for listeners who may not know, BYOB means bring your own bottle. There are places where that will not serve alcohol, but allow you to bring your own in. And so because you at that moment are working in a wine shop in an area that has a Muslim community, restaurants not serving alcohol at all, visitors, tourists from as
Mhm.
far away as, I don't know, South
Central America.
America, Finland, Asia
Yep.
are coming to Harlem to experience Harlem. They might purchase wine in your shop, want to eat
Correct.
in the neighborhood. And what
Mhm.
you do is suggest to them, based on where
Correct.
they're going, what wine they could buy to
Correct.
bring directly themselves to the restaurant. So
To
in
pair with the
to
style of food that
pair
they're eating.
with their evening dinner. So you're working with an international clientele
Correct.
in a hyper local space, Harlem,
Yep.
116th Street.
That's right.
And you are translating food, experience, culture, and
Mhm.
language for them. And out of all of that and doing that over and over again, you were like, maybe
Yep.
there is a market for me to do this on a different scale and in a different
Correct.
way. And first, you started hosting dinners in your home.
Yep.
And then from there,
Mhm.
what happened next?
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't fit in my apartment no more. So reaching out to local restaurants, it was very important for me to be able to translate my traveling experiences through food and wine connection. I think it is imperative to say that a lot of the travel that I started doing afterwards, once I was like, I'm gonna go deep into wine, was very much like wine travel. When I say wine travel, meaning like I went to places that were specifically known for wine, going back and forth to Europe, going back and forth to Italy specifically as well, because I still had now my community of family and friends that live there. So now I had a home. I can go back to Rome, see them, and then I would go like, okay, I need to go to Tuscany this week, or or next time I never been to Puglia, let's go down to Puglia. And so the restaurants that had this type of like food, like Vinitaria in Harlem, Yvette is the owner, Black woman, owns the restaurant. I said I want to do a pop up for 50 people because I knew I couldn't have 50 people in my house. I was probably one of the biggest first ones I've ever done was 50 people at that restaurant, and we locked in with like Northern Italian cuisine. So I wanted to go super focused so I can be able to give people one education, give like, again, as you know, Italy and all of the different regions is not the same. So I think as Americans, we think of like all Italian food. I wanted to be hyper focused as well as it relates to the wine and food from those regions.
So, what I hear in what you're sharing is you really were seeking to chart a path that no one had charted. And you didn't
Yeah,
exactly have any one person in your life who had done the thing you were seeking to do. And I
not
often
at all.
say, for many people who are listening also are creatives or people who are perhaps considering something entrepreneurial, that it's almost like you have to be the architect of the life you want to lead. And so you eventually form two things: your shop, right, which is communion wine shop.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that is an outgrowth, or that grows out of the pop-up experiences.
Right.
But then you also form these travel experiences as a
Mhm.
sommelier that contract your services to help businesses and individuals build wine experiences like only you can because of what you know. Okay, that's
I
brilliant.
would like to say so.
Well, but in the meantime, you had this beautiful little stop along the way working for one of my favorite publications, Cherry Bomb.
Oh,
What did that experience offer you? Because that, to me, on the outside looking in, for those who don't know what Cherry Bomb is, it's a wonderful magazine about women in food and wine, essentially. And there is everything from features to food as lifestyle to recipes to just and you were one of the editors there.
the first beverage editor. So I think that the opportunity came at a very unique time. It was during the pandemic. Uh, George Floyd had just passed. I literally was working as a sommelier in Lisbon at a Michelin star restaurant, and then there's no more restaurant. There's like, I mean, the restaurant is back, but I mean, like in this case, during that time, the idea of being a sommelier was being questioned. Like, what is the future
I
of the
see.
sommelier, right?
Because again, going back to what you said earlier, a sommelier's role in
Hmm.
terms of being a wine educator only exists inside the confines of a restaurant. So when the pandemic happened and restaurants were closed,
Correct.
the industry began to ask the question,
Yes.
what is the role of a sommelier if there are no restaurants? And so through Cherry Bomb and being an editor there, you were able to really bring that acumen, that knowledge to readers digitally through
Yeah,
social
I think.
media and all of that. And I think it really began to kind of like, you know, and yes, people were drinking a lot of wine during the pandemic. So and people were really curious about it. But I think that what I like about, I read somewhere that you call yourself a wine griot. Now, so two things I want to break down that we've been talking about wine and your knowledge of wine, but a griot, for those who don't know, and it's spelled Griot, is a bringer of story and wisdom in the African tradition. And so when you are a wine griot, what does that mean to you?
The storytelling and education, being an orator. I think that if I knew my ancestors as far back as, in Africa, I think that I, if there was a person who was anointed with that gift, I could tell that I was part of that lineage. That's my role, to be an orator, and how do I share the stories, continue to teach, and then being able to be the person who's doing all the traveling and then bringing the message back, right? So that's very important to me,
The
whether it's
message of what you've seen, what you've
what I
learned,
see,
the
what I
ways
learned,
that cultures are similar, the ways cultures are
correct,
different, the way the
correct,
foods we eat, and in a certain sense, in being the griot, in bringing the one who goes out and experiences and then comes back, to the tribe and is like, this is what
yes,
I saw, this is what I know.
yeah,
You are translating wine, but what you're really translating is a greater story of humanity.
amen.
I've also heard you say that, and again, this is again into your personal philosophy, because I think a lot of people who are listening are interested in sort of like the entrepreneurial mindset, the pivot mindset. But you have said self-awareness is the cheat code. Okay, tell me, what do you mean by that?
Allowing yourself to kind of reevaluate the whole scenario, right? And then stepping into like making choices that you are able to say, this made me feel good. I'm happy when I'm learning about wine. How do I step into a career path that's more focused on that, right? So what does that look like? Where do I start? So start doing that research. So first you got to be aware of yourself and what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what's making you stressed, knowledgeable about your body, etc. And and that's why I'm a big fan of vision boarding. Everybody knows me. I'm a big vision board person. Um, I tend to always rely on my vision board to kind of bring me back to what was even with the crazy year I had this year, the vision board was created before that, thank God. So I can be able to go, okay, what was the original plan here? Like, are we still on track or how do I get back there? So that kind of reconnecting and journaling out back to whether in a journal or in a case with the collage, with the vision boarding, and really taking that step seriously, even now at this age. I recognize it's my personal cheat code on when people are like, oh, how did that happen? I'm like, okay, this didn't work out. It failed. But maybe was there a reason why? I didn't feel connected with that in the way I thought I was going to be. But we tried it out and it was good, girl. Come on, we got to move forward. And that's where I'm at in my life. And I try to do that more often, even when it's hard, even when I've invested a lot of money into it. I'm now thinking kind of more consciously as an entrepreneur, how do I still stand by the words that you read? So
What I like, and what you and again, I too believe in a you know version of intention setting or putting yourself on the path to manifestation. There are all kinds of ways people like to talk about it, but quite frankly, I really do believe for me, in my brain, it helps to do it verbally, and that is writing about it, so journaling. But then second to that is visually, and that is the calling forth the visions in the form of the vision board with images. And that pairing of both the writing, the verbal, and the visual together, I find, allow me to get closer to the manifestation of whatever the thing is I'm seeking to do. So for anyone listening, Cha co-signs on this. Visual as well as verbal to get on the path. Now, so this brings me to the next question, which is when people ask you, how do you do? How can I do what you do?
oh,
Uh-huh. How
I thought
can
you were gonna
I
ask
do
something
what you
else.
do? What do you say back to them?
It depends on how they get exposed to me. Most of the people who see me as Cha the sommelier, and I usually get more questions on how do I become a sommelier, right? And so first I do want to give people that space of just understanding that I haven't been on the restaurant floor since 20, January 2020, and kind of really just kind of clear the space to say that my work as a sommelier has now elevated to me be beyond that. Some people don't recognize that sommelier is not the goal. The goal is to own the restaurant, right? To own wine bar, to own the sommelier is an employee of somewhere, right? So I love to being able to share or be an expression of Black equity in the beverage space for us, where it's okay. Today is more acceptable for us to be a sommelier because we're talking loudly about it, but it was more common before. And people are still fighting in certain cities and areas for that. See us as mixologists. I think a big part of the work that I did, especially with Cherry Bomb, was less about it was about highlighting the fact that we are in these spaces. So being able to bring out the women of color who worked in these roles and be able to have articles on our social media to be able to shine a light on folks who owned maybe a whiskey brand. You know, now people talking about Fawn Weaver and all the things that she's doing with Uncle Nearest, you know, but that's years in the making. Now she has the book to you show for it, and McBride sisters, which I know you also interviewed, you know. So there's many of us who's been in this game before it's been cool to, you know, interview us, right? And so there is a part of when people ask, how do I do what you do? And I'm like, well, what I do is actually push the beverage narrative to the next level. Now, if that's over your head, then you haven't picked up that every moment of the things that you saw, all the seeds that you've seen me doing is a part of a much larger link. Is not I'm not a sommelier or just the owner of a wine shop or the beverage director for one of the largest wine and food festivals in America. I'm all of them at once because the larger narrative is that I want to be able to use my talents, my wisdom, my education to be able to highlight others, give everybody else the platform, because that's the only way we're going to push actually the beverage, I would say, in the same direction that food has gone when it comes to wine. And therefore, and I must also include beverage in general, so mixology, etc., spirit brand owners. My shop and all the work that I do is to highlight and give a platform for small producers, right? Women, LGBTQ plus, Black winemakers, small Haitian rum brand that we were the first ones to bring them into America, you know, like in the retail space, we were the first ones to carry them. So the work that I do on a more like molecular engineering problem solving way is really trying to make sure that how do I bring people who I know who are doing the work in the beverage industry to a much larger, whether it's platform, any tables that I'm at, and then people thinking more intentionally on how they drink because they've been told to do that with their food, whether it's for health reasons or to, you know, eat at this Black restaurant, right? All the social media around that. But when it comes to beverages, we're almost forgotten about. You know, like you can eat at this Black restaurant, but no one's questioning the big corporate white brand wine
Mondavi wine.
where it doesn't make sense. You know, I need to math the math. So that's my work.
What I also like about what I think I heard you say is that in asking the question, how do I do what you do? I think you've also boomeranged the question back to the person asking to say, how can you can't do what I do, but
Right.
can you do that is unique to you? Because I think in your
Yes.
story, you saw an opening and you've made a career of standing in the gap of cultural knowledge of you're the griot. The griot stands in a gap of knowledge and says, I have a story to tell you. And your story that you're here to tell is of, as you eloquently said, of winemakers, of beverage makers, of people who are doing really beautiful and incredible things in their industry, and you give them a platform. I have to ask, because our show is called Lifted, I have to ask, who has lifted you up in this journey? Because as you are elevating and lifting so many others, so many beverage makers, right?
Mhm.
And you're really lifting a community. You're doing a lot of lifting in your work, but who has lifted you?
Yeah, I think that it all, since I do so much, I think that it depends on kind of in what space. I already mentioned Eric White. He was my first general manager at the first wine shop that even opened my mind to what it means to be in the wine industry. Um, Giving me the knowledge about the different certifications, et cetera, kind of like teaching me the
Mhm.
roadmap to even kind of get into the game seriously, right? And so I would be remiss without speaking about him. There's the work that I do as it relates to just even entrepreneurship with the wine shop. Christy Frank, she owned a wine shop in New York City. She has one now in like just north of the Hudson. And I think that, just going to her as a mentor and advisor, I think you should always pay your advisors. They're taking time out. I'm a big component of making sure you pay your people. Amongst the many things, going back to being education, I'm the adjunct professor for wine at Syracuse University. And so I spend a lot of time and I hire some of my students to the store, right? And so the store is located near the university. And so I can tell when you with young people, especially the Gen Zs, shout out to them, I love them. Uh, the key word and all the Instagram girlies are talking about getting a mentor and someone's a girl's girl because they did this for you, but no one's paying for the services of those people. They think that the mentorship relationship is free. And so whatever the giving may be, maybe you come and support them for their event. Maybe you, like me, you do the work. Like you're not there just for a free ticket. You're like, how can I help you behind? Or, like, oh, I heard you giving this. I want to come. You actually are offering your time and services to help, or you physically are actually like, oh, how much would it cost if I can, pick your brain, as people say, for whatever amount of time. So I think that some of the relationships, respectfully, the networks that I have is because either it's one of those things. Like I found myself in rooms with the Clancy Millers of the world, et cetera, because I said, hey, if you ever need a hand, I'm more than happy to work with you on your wine sponsorship program for this event, or if you want to come be a part of this, so it shouldn't be all just take it relationship,
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then I feel like that builds better mentoring relationship because everybody busy, right? Everybody kind of like, I want you, I want you to be my mentor. But I mean, if they feel like there's something you can give to that, I feel like that would be reciprocal. Now, I don't want anybody coming for me like everything has to be a give take relationship.
No, well, but
I
hold
think
on. I
there
want
is
to just,
something that
I don't think that that's what you're saying. I think what you were saying is that be aware
mhm,
of offering
first.
as a first.
Mhm,
What can I do? I admire what you do. I
mhm,
like what you do. What you do is changing the world. How can I support what you are doing? How can I be a part of it? What do you need help here?
mhm,
Offer first,
mhm.
make yourself, and by the way, this is, in the business world, this is very much talked
Oh,
about
yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot in terms of how you approach up and get, seek the mentorship that you want. And then, and then know that you do that well, maybe even once, at most twice, someone's going to turn and go, now, what can I do for you?
Right.
And then that is the start of a really beautiful mentor relationship, as opposed to one that is just a cold calling out of nowhere. Hey, can you help me X?
And sometimes they will, right? Someone's like, oh, no problem, I can help you. I think there's also something like when they do help you afterwards, you can be like, thank you. I got me that article I needed. Child, how can I help you do something? Is anything that I could work on? I feel like it's also you can still ask for the thing you want, but you may be good at social media and I'm horrible. Don't make it seem like, oh, I got it all figured out because I'm here and you're there or something. But I really think there's something to say about whatever your skill sets are, et cetera, just offering them up, even if it's not about money. And so yeah, Christy Frank was someone who owned two. She still has one now, and has a wine retail shop. And so she just was showing me the ropes and was very open and honest about the process for me. Again, everyone still has to have their own experience, and I was a different city from her, so there's some learnings there. And all my chef friends, I mean, I can't I think that kept me grounded into the industry. I didn't really hang out with a lot of sommeliers. So I would say I have a lot of peers that's in this industry, that, Chef Kyla, Chef Shaquay, Chef Eris, that I just grew up back to travel. We got to bring it back to travel. I was part of, you ever heard of No Madness Travel Tribe?
No madness, travel tribe.
When I was living in Italy, I was like, okay, like I don't know where the black folks is at. I don't know where to go. I don't know where to get my hair done. And so this Facebook group connected me with other people, whether it was in military, etc. So like this is pre where it was cool meeting people on the internet. But I'm like going up to Bologna in Italy, hanging out with somebody that I met through this traveling
Facebook group.
tribe group and flying up to Stockholm from Italy because of this. So I think there is something to say about the community of like chefs that I met through that, but also we also equally had our own journey as travelers. And so we connected on a deeper level and really wanted to explore the world and learn about whether it's food or at least engage in food from different cities. And that also just made me feel very connected, and we always continue to call each other up whenever we need help. So that's the first time I even did a job for James Beard. It wasn't through my own introduction. It's because Chef Eris, she called me up and she was doing something there for Thanksgiving. And she said, I want you to be the sommelier. And I said, let's do it. And so I can't say enough about that community.
I think what you're pointing to, and what's a beautiful way to kind of wrap up our conversation, which is that there is a reciprocity that happens organically, but you can also have a reciprocity that can happen with intention. And it seems like what you are doing in the world is lifting others up with this idea of a kind of, in helping someone else, and then it lifts everybody. It just elevates, to your point, the whole industry. What is the legacy? And by what I mean by legacy, it can be something physical, it can be monetary, it can be a business. What is the legacy you want to leave with the work that you do?
I think simply just knowing that I helped change the beverage industry from both the consumer end and as someone who works in it, and it's a change of perspective, right? I want people to think differently and more intentionally about beverage. So I think it goes down to people caring about people, at the end of the day. So I think that all my work ends up being wrapped up around that, whether me opening a shop 4 hours away from where I actually live. It's like there was a need, the people there wanted these types of wines that was in New York City that they didn't have access to. So there was something about like, how do we meaning this city shouldn't be excluded from being able to have
Sure.
access to more Black owned wine brands, or the fact that they more natural, less, processed wine. So I'm here to solve, problems in the beverage industry
You're
at
an
large.
engineer in you're an engineer in the beverage industry who
Correct.
has vision, hustle,
Correct.
courage, acumen, and a great, great spirit of common unity, which is the name of your community.
That's correct.
What is the title of your book?
Literally, it's communion. It's named after that's the next one, and I'm super excited.
It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait to get my hands on it. Thank you, Cha. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm so excited for all the things that are going to come for you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lifted is developed, written, and produced by me and my one-woman producing team, Celia Cates. It is edited by Jamie Moss. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for our next inspiring episode.